It's a great pleasure to be here at the first DevOps Days Portugal, and I'm sure there are going to be a lot more. So I'm going to be talking about product teams, why they need a family as well. So if you don't know John Cutler, I highly recommend following him on Twitter. He's a product guy. He has really great insights on product management, team dynamics, and how to build great products. So he's saying, if you want great products, you need cross-functional empowered teams. So this makes sense, right? If you have a team that has all the different skills needed to build and iterate and experiment over a product until they find the right match for what the customers need, and that's the best way to go about it. At the same time, there's more and more talk about this movement from project-oriented organizations to product-oriented organizations. So Nationwide Insurance, they're quite large in the US. BMW is talking about this, Barclays. There are a lot of examples. But if you think about it, it's actually quite hard. If you think about what would need to change in the organization to focus on products rather than projects, we're talking about financing, how you do budgets, human resources as well, even office layout. If you want a product team to be effective, they need the space for them to work together. They also need space to collaborate with other teams. You can't just do it ad hoc and put people anywhere. So why are these large organizations talking about this if it's so difficult? Well, we now have research from State of DevOps report that Mirko mentioned, and also the Accelerate book that I highly recommend, which tells us that high-performing teams can deliver twice as fast as other teams and with better quality at the minimum. So that's the gain that we're trying to get from moving to product-oriented. So if we go back to the origins of DevOps, 10 years ago, why DevOps came about was really to address this problem, right? The silos. I'm sure you've seen the meme of throwing software over the wall to the ops teams. It only comes back when it's on fire in production. So having only this kind of, having this isolation and very formal procedures to communicate, tickets, formal documents, formal meetings, was the problem. So the basic premise of DevOps was just to get these teams to collaborate, to actually know each other and work together through difficult problems, like how do I deploy without downtime? How do I monitor my application? Which kind of metrics do I want to get from it? How do I make it faster to debug problems in production and fix them without being on call at, being called at 3 a.m. in the morning? These were the basics of DevOps. So when we're talking about product teams, we're actually saying, well, if this works well, if we bring this even closer together, then we actually end up with a single team, a product team, if you like. So if this is effective, then we could say, well, then if we have multiple products or services in our organization, we just scale this, right? We just create as many product teams as services and products we have. But as you might imagine, this is not very feasible, especially in established organizations. The kind of skills that you need and the kind of changes to make this work, you can't just reproduce and scale this model like that. So what I'm saying is there's a limit to scalability of this model. So I've seen a few cases where, yes, if you have a small number of teams, they can be so autonomous that they work almost as independent startups, if you like. But that's very hard to achieve. So we need something else. So in my consulting experience, especially in the last 5 years, I've seen a lot of things that are obstacles to going faster, to have this kind of continuous flow of delivery that we expect from product teams. So in the book, Team Topologies with Matthew Skelton, we talk about all of this. Today, I'm going to be covering only a small part because I don't have enough time. But one thing that we see is that teams are getting pulled in many directions. So what do I mean by that? Even if you're not focusing on being a product-oriented organization, development teams have more and more requests on them. So we were talking about shift-left testing, but also understanding deployment, understanding how your application runs in production. And at the same time, the development teams still get pressure to deliver faster, deliver more features, because we need to keep up with the market, right? And also what Mirko was talking about in the keynote, that we have these reorganizations every now and then. So agile comes and we say, well, we need to have agile teams and we need to change our roles, etc. Don't get me wrong, that's a good thing to do. It's better than just sending people to a training and say you're agile. But it's painful because then a few years later comes DevOps. So actually, yeah, right, we need also agility in our operations. So we need to reorg again. So it becomes painful and becomes, people become less motivated because they know this is going to happen again in a few years. It's going to be painful again. So even though they know we're going to get better, but they're not fully into the reorganization process. And finally, more kind of on a day-to-day basis, flow often gets blocked. So what I mean by that, if I can move the slide. Okay. So for example, if I have development teams that are trying to deliver new features, but I have a kind of traditional infrastructure team who has the responsibility and ownership over any kind of environments and resources, so if they're the only ones who can create and modify environments, then I need this handover. So development team makes a request, I need this new thing, new resources for my application, and then they wait. So the best case scenario is that since I'm going to have to wait for that request to be completed, I'm going to start other work. So I'm going to have more work in progress, things that are started but not finished, not in the hands of customers. And when that request is completed, then I'm going to get back to what I was doing before and kind of do all the context switching to get there and remember what I was doing and what do I need to do now. So this kind of handovers is where a lot of time gets wasted and where we don't have the kind of speed that we would like in our delivery. And in the worst case scenario, this can lead to kind of toxic culture where there are escalation issues and pressure for the infrastructure team to deliver, and that gets into a blame culture, which is really not useful. Cloud. If I have a cloud team, what does that mean? Depends. If the cloud team is actually showing the same behaviors as the infrastructure team, if they're the owners of the infrastructure, even if it's in a cloud provider, yes, it's much faster to get it done, but I still have this handover, I still have this wait time for the development teams. And finally, another example, if we talk about component teams, right? This, in theory, makes sense. If I have a component that is shared by many applications and teams, then it makes sense to have our own component team who is responsible, who knows this component in detail and can make changes faster. But we get to the same problem. If then I have multiple development teams that need a change, this component team is in the critical path for the development teams to deliver their changes. So it's slowing down flow. So the key points, handovers can almost kill your flow and introduce a lot of delays. So if we're looking for speed and quality as well, then we need to reduce handovers. I like this slide from a BMW talk because they were explaining all the things that you expect, around comms, culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. But also they explicitly say we want our development teams to have as much autonomy as possible to reduce handovers. They explicitly talk about that. So a product team would expect to behave a little bit like this. So if from left to right is the flow of work, then they're able to take an idea, an experiment, a request, and build it, test it, and deploy, and also monitor how it's running in production. And very importantly, they're able to get feedback as quickly as possible. So from the runtime, from operations, from support perhaps, if we're getting a lot of requests around this new feature or an old feature, maybe we have a regression. And hopefully also directly with the customers and users, getting to know, is this matching what you expected, what you needed to get done? And then they're able, as quickly as possible, to get that feedback into the product. Because really getting to a great product that matches our customers' needs is a matter of fine-tuning until we get there, right? So what John was talking about is fine-tuning and experimenting and iterating quickly until we get to what customers want and hopefully pay us money for. So the elephant in the room here is that to achieve these cross-functional teams, product teams often face lacking the necessary competences. This is what Peter Newmark was saying a few years ago. So let's think about a development team today. We would expect probably that they have software design capabilities, coding, obviously, testing, deploying. I would hope there will be a kind of minimum baseline for any development team today. And now we're saying, well, you also need to understand infrastructure. We have infrastructure as code. You need to use deployment pipelines to get your changes into production. CI/CD is now the norm. And you need to understand how the application runs and the performance, etc. Security as well. We are talking a lot about shifting left security, make sure there are no known vulnerabilities in our changes and that the code doesn't have any serious security issues. But the interesting thing is that all of this that you see here is just to make sure we can build the product right. So it's assuming we have the right idea and we are able to build, test, and deploy and get it into the customer's hands. If we have a real product team, they also need all this other stuff. Product viability, understanding metrics from the application, monitoring, user experience, obviously, and the more involved QA approach than normal. So with that, then they'll be able to actually build the right product. So they're able to quickly iterate and make changes and see what's working and what isn't working. So we're really saying we want to increase the autonomy of teams so they can go faster, they can do better, but they need the competences. So these are the building blocks for them to go faster. Otherwise, if we're asking things from them that they don't have the capabilities, they're going to go slower. How do we alleviate this kind of tension between we want them to be as autonomous as possible, but they need the competences? So it's kind of what Mirko was saying is the keynote. You have to pick them up where they are. So if they're at a low level of engineering maturity, then you cannot just say, now you're autonomous and you self-organize and you're going to do great. See you in 6 months. So basically, they need a support system, right? A family of other teams who have specific responsibilities to enable the stream or the product teams to really go fast and deliver and iterate quickly. So in the book, we talk about these 4 types of fundamental topologies. So I'm going to explain each one of them, but I start with the stream-aligned teams. So you can see them just as a product team. The reason why we don't call them product teams is you have, for example, more and more systems where you have hardware devices connected to the cloud, and then you have a mobile app that controls the device, and this is becoming more prevalent. So it becomes a little bit hard to set the boundaries of what a product is and to say this team is responsible for this product. So we prefer to talk about stream-aligned teams that are aligned to hopefully a business need or a business area, and then within that business area you have different, it can be different services, can be a set of features within a larger product, etc. So we prefer that term. But the way of working is essentially the same. And so the other 3 types of teams are here to enable and to help the stream-aligned teams. So if the stream-aligned team is kind of the heartbeat of delivery and we want them to perform better, it's like with my kids, I expect them to be able to do great things, but right now they need help to evolve and grow and learn how to do things. So the first type of team that we talk about are platform teams. Mirko is right, I was going to talk about platforms. So the essential idea here is that a stream-aligned team is going to need multiple services. Can be more technical, like when we need to do monitoring, deployments, provisioning, infrastructure, etc. If I have a platform that abstracts the details of those services, then the stream team can just consume them, use them, without having to know all the details. Because we cannot expect them to understand all the tooling around it, what's the good practices about using these tools to do these kind of services. So the platform team is responsible to abstract those away and make it easy to consume. So that's things that the stream team doesn't have to worry about, and they can focus on the business, on the product, on delivering features. So it's like kind of my 2-year-old, we have to kind of feed him as a service, right? He doesn't care about which ingredients do you need, how do you cook, and who cleans it up. He doesn't have to worry about that. Just consume the service. So a very key point here about a platform is that we're not talking about the platforms of old, where you'd have a kind of a black box of a lot of services, where we'd say, well, any service that is used by multiple teams is going to go in this platform. But then the reliability was poor. These services were not always matching what the teams actually needed to do. So it was actually a distraction for the stream teams, because they have to understand how this platform works and actually work around it many times. So this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about focusing on the smallest set of services and provide them with high reliability and make sure they match the needs of the stream teams. So we expect when you're developing a new service for the platform, there's a high level of collaboration with the stream teams to really understand, is this what you need? Is this matching the things you need to do for your product? And also, another important point is the platform should not be a mandatory thing. If you make the platform optional, but so compelling to use that you know, I can use the platform and be up and running on monitoring, let's say, in 1 day, rather than invest 2 weeks understanding different tools and how do I install Prometheus or whatever, that's going to make it much more compelling to use the platform. Because we often underestimate how long it takes for a development team to actually start doing something new like that, like monitoring. It's as over-optimists, we tend to say, oh, we just look at a few tools, which one seems better, and go. But then you get all the problems associated with that. Another type of support team are enabling teams. I cannot think of a better example to give you than what Allegra just talked about with her testing center of excellence, the way they help teams to get started on some areas that they don't know about yet. So test automation could be UX, you name it. But they're really orbiting around the stream-aligned teams. So they're facilitating the stream teams to be able to learn the skills that they need to upskill without having to spend all the time in this long learning curve and making the mistakes that beginners make always. So the enabling team might be helping doing research around which tools, frameworks around this area of expertise are useful for our organization. So it's essentially a team of experts on a given area, test automation, UX, whatever, and they help the stream teams gain the capabilities that they are missing. It's like putting the training wheels on a bike so they can don't have to fall so many times until they learn how to ride the bike. And the final one, complicated subsystem, is kind of, we recommend that you shouldn't need it. So the large majority of systems should not need this. What we're talking about is if you have kind of very complex algorithms or components like face recognition, even though that's become kind of a commodity. But I used to work in a company where we had a PhD person who was the only one who understood this algorithm for face recognition. Video processing, trading systems also tend to have very complex algorithms. So in that case, it's not realistic to ask a product team that needs this module or this subsystem to own it as well. You need a team around this component that can provide it and can make it evolve. The important thing here is that they need this product mindset. They need to understand we're providing this subsystem as a product to the stream teams. It's like asking my 4-year-old, if I ask him to tie shoelaces, that's like going to be too complex for him at this point. Not realistic. So to give you just an example of how these things play together, how these different types of teams, you should look at this as an example, as a snapshot in time. So organizations should evolve, and we're saying rather than having reorganizations every few years that are painful, we should be able to evolve continuously. So in this example, what you can see is maybe I have an enabling team around test automation who is helping the stream team on top to gain those skills because they have never done BDD or other kind of test automation. Maybe I have a complicated system that I have already a working version that the streamlined team at the bottom is using. The current version works fine for them, no problem. But the streamlined team on top actually needs new features from this complicated subsystem. And so they are collaborating for a period of time to understand what we need to change so that this fits what the stream team needs. And at the bottom, we have a platform team. It's stable, the platform. We have a set of services that are being used, but consumed as a service by the other teams. So we don't need to actually collaborate very closely at this moment in time. But maybe in the future, maybe in a few months, we know that, well, now we need to improve our whatever application performance monitoring, and I need new services, and I need to collaborate with the stream teams again. So look at this as a snapshot in time, and it's going to evolve in order to meet whatever technical challenges came along, if you are thinking that you need to go to Kubernetes, for example, or you have market changes that need to be addressed quickly. Sometimes you need to collaborate closely between teams. Other times you just can be more independent and work on your own. So we think if we use this with care, this can help us build and run modern software systems faster with higher quality. And importantly, this gives us also a kind of high-level view of our organization. So if you think about all the teams in your organization, just from their names or kind of high-level description, it's very hard to understand as an organization what are our capabilities, what are we good at, where do we have our lacks, and things that we need to improve. So if we align the teams to these fundamental topologies, we have a more clear idea of where do we need to go, what kind of things do we need to address, and how. So in team topologies, we talk about multiple things that we need to address for fast flow, this kind of continuous flow that we were talking about with product teams. Today, I focused only on a few of them, the 4 fundamental topologies, how we expect teams to interact at different points in time, and how to evolve. And these are the references from some of the examples I gave. For example, in terms of platform teams, this talks from Adidas, Mercedes, which was actually at DevOps Lisbon, Twilio and Farfetch was also at DevOps Lisbon, are really good examples on how they approach this platform work. They don't always call it a platform, but it's essentially what they're doing. Getting a set of services that is easy to use for the development teams to go faster without having to worry about it. There's a cheeky announcement there because the Man, Truck, and Bus hasn't happened yet. It's going to be on the 17th of June, so if you're around, come to DevOps Lisbon. But they're going to talk about their cloud platform. And I think if you are looking to move to a product-oriented organization with high-performing teams, I think these 3 books can help you get started. They're all from IT Revolution. And with that, I say keep calmish. So you'll hear about calms. I like to add O for organization design, and because it's funny. And just enjoy the conference. I'll be around 2 days, so feel free to come up to me, and I'd love to chat. Thank you. Any questions?
Hi. Thank you for the talk. It was really good. You talked about the 4 different topologies of teams. What would be the major difference between the complicated subsystem team and the platform? Besides, we usually take a look at the platform because they live beneath the surface and near the iron. But the platform is basically a subsystem team, right? It owns complicated systems. It provides them as a service, ideal. What's the major difference?
Well, platform normally is a set of services that might be services that you need to build and deploy and run. And the complicated subsystem is part of your application normally. So you need to very importantly, the team that's responsible for this subsystem needs to understand how it integrates with the applications that need them, how to test them, and collaborate with the stream teams to make sure, maybe use contract testing to make sure that it does what you need. So that's probably the hard part, is that having this product mindset that we're not just building something in isolation and being really excited about our complex algorithm and our mathematics or what have you, but you're providing a service or something as a service to the other team. So you need to collaborate when things are changing, and otherwise you need to focus on the reliability of this component. So I think the key difference is the subsystem runs as part of the application rather than a service that you use to build and develop the application.
Thank you.
You showed how the proposal that you have in your book is really intended for scaling up. So you see that you have your DevOps teams, that you have more and more DevOps teams. It's really not a scalable solution. How can we scale down what you're proposing? In other words, as you want to introduce these 4 types of teams, for example, but you have a smaller group, how could you see that fitting into an organization?
Well, I would say first start understanding what are the capabilities that you need and that are missing. So it depends on the scale. If it's really small, if you have 2, 3, 4 teams, you might be able to just have them all be autonomous and help each other and collaborate. So the collaboration can come between 2 product teams or 2 streamlined teams, where one is maybe more advanced in, say, infrastructure as code, and the other one needs help. They can collaborate and evolve so that the second team also gets those skills. So I wouldn't focus as much on the fundamental topologies if you're a small organization, kind of the expected behaviors and making explicit what we're doing. So we're collaborating for this period of time to get second team to be proficient in infrastructure as code. We're not doing the work for them. We're not saying, team 1, now you're the expert, now you're going to help and do the work for us. No, it's an enabling function. It's helping the second team get better. So I would start there for a smaller organization, understand missing capabilities to go faster, and then which teams can collaborate and make it explicit. We are collaborating for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, until we get to this point where the other team is at least has the working knowledge to continue. Does that make sense?
Manuel, good talk as always. Thank you. So what is your advice to observe if the flow is really helping the organization? If you have any kind of perspective on this.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you can, if we're talking about continuous flow and delivery of features, you can get into this idea that John Cutler talks about feature factory, in the meaning that you're just putting features out, but you don't really know if they're bringing benefit to the organization. So that's why I was saying a real product team needs to have this understanding of product viability, what is the market, what are the customers asking us, and then, for instance, having real monitoring of how the application is being used in production, and identifying, also running experiments. So you're saying, let's do an experiment, we're gonna put this in production and see if customers are using it or not, what are the problems that they're finding, as well as talking directly to customers. But the product team needs to be looking at what are we trying to achieve from a product point of view. And that's not easy if you have a purely technical team that is just focusing on, this works and I have my tests and it runs, but is it matching what customers need? And that's a process of iteration more than anything. We never heard of a waterfall project that was on time and delivered what customers need, right? Then you have another 6 months of actually making changes to match how the needs evolved. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.